So this is a dangerous one. So my reading and the reading by the task force of the ICAP was also the same, that it will apply even if the loan is from a company which is controlled by the government. So the institute had proposed this to be redrafted for this understanding to be clear that the SCCP is saying, but it has not been redrafted and it stays exactly like this. The issue of shares at discount. Getting inspired from the Indian Act, the first draft came up with a restriction on issue of shares at discount beyond 50% discount. So if the par value of a share was 10 rupees, no one can issue the shares at discount at less than 5. It was debated and the ICAP comment in that respect was agreed by SCCP, and in the second draft it is now changed. And it's a very favorable change. First, if you are issuing shares at up to 10% discount, and if the market value for the 90 days has remained below the offer price, so if it's a 10 rupee share, if the market price has remained below 9 and you are offering it up to 9, you don't need the approval of the SCCP for issuing of this shares at discount anymore. And for the other issue of discounts, presently it's open for the commission to decide whether they give you approval or they do not give you approval, but at least now some requirements and some codifications have been made that what should be the preconditions in which the commission will give approval. So SCCP agreed to this suggestion of ICAP, and still this remains in the law now. Issue of share at discount is still possible. Loan to directors. It can be given now without the approval of the commission, and the only thing which is required is a resolution. Resolution of general meeting required to give the loan to director and the CEO. And in case of CEO, even this resolution is not required if it is part of a service or pursuant to a general scheme which is approved by the special resolution. So in India, this has been tightened up that you cannot give a loan to a director anymore, but our law has loosened it up further, that the approval of the commission is not required in this respect. Then this is an interesting one, the protection of independent and non-executive directors. Presently in the law, whenever a board is penalized for some action that they have done, there is no distinction of whether the penalty will be the same for executive director and or non-executive director or even the independent director. So the new legislation now enables that non-executive director and the independent director shall not be penalized with the board unless in the three situations. Whatever happened with his knowledge, will be part of that overall board penalty. It's attributed through board process with his consent or connivance. He will be part of the overall body of the board that will be penalized, or where he had not acted diligently. So on these three defenses, now the board members which are either non-executive or independent will not be penalized for the overall action of the board, which provision was not there in the old law. And there's a very interesting one. Already there are a lot of requirements, rather a lot of criteria where a person can be disqualified to be the director of a listed company. But presently all the powers are with the court. So the new law has proposed that the powers be given to the commission. So the suo motu powers are now there with the commission if this proposed act gets enacted. And secondly, they have added other situations also in which a person can be debarred from holding the office of a director of a public interest company. And those situations are very interesting. The red ones are the ones which have come up in the second draft, where ICAP has not yet given the comments even. I'm just reading with you, maybe you would enjoy it as much as I did. The affairs of the company of which he is a director have been conducted in a manner which has deprived the shareholders thereof of a reasonable return. I don't understand what is a reasonable return. So reasonable return not given to shareholder, the directors are debarred from being the directors for 5 years of all listed companies under suo motu powers of the commission. And this is not the only one, there are others also. Person has been involved in allotment of shares of a company for inadequate consideration. Now, what is the right appropriate consideration? How would that be determined? There is no mechanism. The company of which he is a director has acted against the interests of the sovereignty and integrity of Pakistan, the security of the state, friendly relations with the foreign states. So there is a contract with a Chinese company. The contract has been breached. I don't know what will happen to the friendly relations. So the directors will go, they will be debarred from holding the office for 5 years. The person entered into a plea bargain with NAB. And last one, it is expedient in the public interest so to do under the suo motu powers of the commission. So there are no comments which have yet gone because these were the changes in the second draft. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed for what happens in the third draft. If something comes in the very near final draft, all of a sudden then also. So the proposal is that this to be rationalized, and positively when we discuss the way forward, the institute will be sending their comments on these also. Then certain additions have been done to the duties of the directors, the statutory duties of the directors. And again, I have let the language remain here, and I'll read it with you. Act in good faith in order to promote the objects of the company for the benefit of the members, in the best interest of the company, best interest of the employees, best interest of shareholders, best interest of the community, of course, at large, and for the protection of the environment. As a student, I had always heard that there are conflicting interests of the stakeholders. So a director has a statutory duty now to act in the best interest of all at the same point in time. And if there is a breach of duty by the director, what happens? Not only that he can be debarred for the 5 years holding a public interest company's directorship, rather there are penalties for that also. So the institute had given its recommendations that the matter needs to be addressed. Maybe separate guidelines can be made, some code can be made for the directors the way they have to do that, but it cannot be a statutory duty of the auditor on which he can be penalized or debarred. But even the second draft has the same wording. Moving on, a lot of cases are there between shareholders as to who's the rightful shareholder of a company. I had sold my shares to someone, whether the sale had taken place or not, whether there was a fraudulent sale or not. Right now the power to amend the register of members lies with the court. And we think logically it resides with the court, and the reason for that is that it is not a corporate law matter. Whether a sale has taken place or not, it's a matter of other laws. Whether the contract or agreement to sell, what is the status of that? Some other law. The court will have to record evidence. So all these powers, court can exercise because they have a jurisdiction. But the proposal is that all these powers go to the commission. So how will they record the evidence? How will they exercise their jurisdiction onto the contract laws and the transfer of title laws? Even they are unclear, but the power is proposed to go to with them. And they say that this is only for the reason because many court cases linger on for years and years into the court and the courts are not working, hence we want to take this power. The comment from the institute was that it needs to be left with the court, let it remain there, but even the second draft does not cater to that, and presently the way it is envisaged, it is exactly the same power which has gone to the commission. Arsalan, namaz ka, just let me know if we have time, 15 minutes, right? Another one, related party transactions. So I want to share a little story before we discuss that. The first draft that came up had a requirement that the following transactions between related parties, which are almost everything, other than the normal trading transactions, almost everything, this can only be done under the authority of special resolution. Second, in that special resolution, the person who, because of whom these entities are related, cannot vote. And third, the quantum of special resolution passing was changed from 3/4 of the members present to 3/4 of the total membership. So could there be any related party transaction ever? No. That was the first draft. And rightly they had copied it from the Indian law. In India this law is not there since 2013, rather even before. There it is required that all these transactions are to be passed by special resolution, and in that special resolution the person because of whom the entities get related, he cannot vote. But their special resolution definition is 3 times people vote yes at least to the people who say no. So it was copied from there, special resolution was not copied, nothing else was copied, so this was effectively undoable. So the comments from the institutes were that this cannot happen, you have to think about it, and at least in case of private companies this requirement should not be there. So it's good that they understood that, and the final draft just changes this and makes this requirement that it should be the board of directors who will pass a resolution for this, and the transaction shall be at arm's length. So this is not a requirement for the board of listed companies. This is requirement now for, if the law comes in, all the companies, even the private companies. So what happens, especially in the last one, related parties appointment. So a director gets appointed, he gets some remuneration. So how would that be a related party arm's length transaction? God knows. So at least they have changed it from the special resolution, a special resolution, to the board's resolution, but they're proposing to make it applicable to all the companies and not just the listed companies. Subsidiaries holding shares of a parent. You all know there is a requirement now in the existing law also that subsidiaries cannot buy the shares of their holding companies. But what if a subsidiary gets shares of its holding company in a merger? It need not dispose that off because the restriction is on to buying the shares. There is a loan under which some second, third tier security comes in and falls into a company which happens to be the shares of the parent company's shares. Nothing happens now. Why? You can hold the shares, but you can't buy the shares. So the new requirement that they are proposing is that a subsidiary cannot hold the shares of the parent company. So what will happen? What is the time period in which they will dispose of? It's not there mentioned anything. How can you require a necessary disposal by that company of those shares which legally came to that? But this is staying even after the comments from the institute that subsidiaries cannot hold the shares of their parent companies. Other good ones. The first one is really interesting. They wanted to enable the dividend in kind, which was already enabled. Companies were already giving dividend in kind. So they enabled that you should be able to give dividend in kind only in the form of listed companies' shares. So if I have shares of some unlisted company, I'm an unlisted company myself, I want to give dividend of these shares to my parent, I can't do that. What can I do with these shares since the parent is a related party? Make a transaction at which price? Arm's length price, right? And there is little difference between arm's length price and the arm's length transaction. The requirements, the previously with the related party transactions had all been in relation to arm's length price. Here they are proposing that this should be arm's length transaction. A lot of transactions will not even happen if the parties are not related. Even the price is arm's length.